Hey, what is going on everybody, and welcome to Fantasia. For today, we're going to be jumping into another session of Epic 7 out today. Got some more balance adjustments for you guys. This time around, we're going to be taking a look at changes to 6 heroes and 8 artifacts for the May 7th update, so in about 2 weeks. And this balance adjustment honestly got me pretty excited because of all the artifact changes. Now, unfortunately for me, Smilegate has a tendency to disappoint us with a balance update just before the Epic 7 World Championships. They really don't want huge balance changes affecting the balance of the PvP scene, right? When competition's in season and prize money is at stake. So they opted to go for a rather, I would say, overall lackluster update here, and let's go ahead and talk about all of these changes, right? All the heroes, artifacts, and the Imprint Circuit as well. So the main adjustment that we're seeing here is actually for a good old friend of ours. That's right, Arbiter Vildred. Arbiter Vildred is getting a pretty massive change, actually. He's no longer going to have the 50% chance to decrease combat readiness by 15%. Honestly, kind of worthless, seeing that so many units run effect resistance and stuff. If you're using Arbiter Vildred and you're pushing back squishy units, like DPSs that don't build effect res, kind of worthless, right? You're probably killing them anyway. So with Arbiter Vildred, he is now going to be able to transfer 2 debuffs from the caster onto the opponent, and if you awaken it, when a critical hit is made, he'll ignore effect resistance. If this sounds familiar to you as a veteran player, it's because this is what Champion Zorato used to do. Ignore effect res, transfer debuffs back onto 2 opponents, right? And so, rest in peace, Champion Zorato was such a fun unit to use, and they just refused to buff him for whatever reason. Arbiter Vildred got it taking his spot. It's sort of sad, I'll be honest with you here. His passive, though, what we're going to see is that when he revives, he gains maximum focus and resets the skill cooldown of Dark Blade. That's no longer going to be there, right? He's still going to, upon reviving, have 100% health, have 100% combat readiness, and have max focus, but at the start of the turn, when his focus is full, it fully resets the skill cooldown of Dark Blade. So this is actually really nice, seeing as he'll be able to stack up his focus and stuff, and then reset the cooldowns of his skill 3. This doesn't mean that you have to revive to get it. You gain focus. For example, down here you can see he gains focus for using his skill 3 focus to be exact. And he'll gain it with his skill 1 too, I believe. And so now he actually doesn't even need to run something like Moonlight Dreamblade, because on his skill 3, he'll grant himself an attack buff for 2 turns before he attacks. Not only does he grant 3 focus, though, the damage dealt by his skill 3 is going to be increased, and his exclusive equipment is going to be changed too, so that at the start of the battle, and when revived, this is no longer just a upon revival thing, he will have the Archdemon's Might, which increases his evasion by 70%. Keep in mind, with a artifact, he will have 90% evasion, alright? And he'll increase damage dealt when attacking light elemental units. We don't know what the damage scaling of this is gonna be. However, hopefully it's gonna be pretty significant, seeing as people don't like fighting the tanky light knights, Ruel, Bossarunkas, Empyrean Ilanovs, and all that stuff out there, right? He will have this increased damage dealt for 2 turns, okay? So this is gonna be kind of a big shakeup for Arbiter Vildred, and honestly, if we can figure out a nice build for him, I can definitely see him having a place in the meta. Obviously, counterattacks on him, right, with a counter set perhaps. We'll also talk about some artifact options a little later, because some balance adjustments might help you narrow down what you want to use. But really liking Arbiter Vildred's changes here, right? Next up is Pirate Captain Flan. Never forget these Stove and Reddit users who are down in silver ranks who complained about Pirate Captain Flan's buff that she was supposed to get, that was supposed to be incredibly fun, and now she is a shell of her former self, never been used, and now they're kind of making her into a Zeo bot, right? Just kind of used with Zeo here. So what we have on her skill 1 is that at the end of the turn, she'll automatically detonate bomb effects inflicted on the target, right? Just bomb, not burn and bomb. And what we have on her passive is she no longer has the extra 50% effectiveness. And she no longer has this like cannot trigger a critical hit, right? So they're taking that away. They originally put this in here because of Summertime Iseria's artifact. Pirate Captain Flan used to be able to crit, and then the artifact says you cannot crit in order to land a bomb. So that was the reason for this. They're taking it all away though, and now whenever she activates Hunt, she will grant Swift Attack buff to all allies. So another unit that kind of grants an AoE Swift Attack buff here, which is kind of nasty, but yeah, here we are. ML Pera is the other one that can grant Swift Attack to everybody. We have Brigitte that grants it to a single target, and Ahmed that can also grant it to a single target. And I believe Tactical Architect Koli can also grant it to a single target. So this is actually a really good buff for her in terms of letting her play in aggro and cleave, but you know, she kind of lost her identity as one of the best control units in the entire game that can like 1v4 teams if you can play her right with her cooldowns and not get 15%ed. Long gone are those days here, as Pirate Captain Flan is just going to become a kind of a bridge unit for Zeo type of teams, right? Essentially. So what we have on her skill 3, her full burst, is that she will now be able to steal a buff from the opponent before an 85% chance to decrease defense for 2 turns. So defense break, again, Zeobot, right? You want to go with Zeo, attack your opponent, strip their buffs if you want to. When they don't have a buff anymore, you get Hunt, you get to boost everyone by 15% combat readiness, you get the Swift Attack buff, and then Pirate Captain Flan goes, she will S3, she'll defense break everybody, and she'll push back their combat readiness by 20%. This is nerfed a little bit because it used to be 30%, and then she used to gain 50% combat readiness, so she's no longer gaining the combat readiness herself, which again hampers her ability to kind of solo control teams and stuff like that, which really sucks. I feel like the old buff she was gonna get should be rolled out here, right? She's losing her full identity as like a control unit, and there's really no point in having her really deal with bombs at this point. I think it's just better off, you're better off just using her as a unit to bridge off of things like Zeo and other openers, because the defense break, because the combat readiness push up for your team and the back for your opponent. Yeah, I think it's is she going to be useful maybe for some cleave and aggro teams? I think she might be, but as a person who enjoys playing control from time to time, this is definitely not the direction that you really want to see Pirate Captain Flan going in. So I think this is a big L for me personally, just a personal bias here, but also just me being salty from Stove and Reddit complaining in the past and getting her previous buff canceled. Anyway, moving on here, we have Tenebria, and Tenebria is going to get the Spectre Tenebria treatment with the skill 1 actually attacking 2 enemies, but they actually put it so that her combat readiness increase by 50% is going to be split. So anytime you do put an enemy to sleep, she increases by 25. You can still get 50 if you hit 2 units, right? Times 2. So this just makes her a bit more consistent in terms of gaining the combat readiness. I'm not really sure if she's going to be used in PvP, I'll be very honest with you. She just doesn't seem like the type of unit that has enough utility for that. But one good thing is that her Ominous Thunder now will dispel a buff before decreasing the combat readiness by 30%, and she will actually make them unable to be buffed for 2 turns. Perhaps this might bring her into the PvP scene. Could be okay as like a control unit here with, you know, 2 units being put to sleep. Sleep is one of the weakest control debuffs. It's weaker than Stun, obviously Stun being the best one, weaker than Fear. It's because if you hit someone who's asleep, they can wake up. Meanwhile, you can hit units that have Fear, and they won't proc their passives and stuff, right? If Emma Bologna's feared and she gets full fighting spirit, she won't retaliate in response. If someone's asleep and you hit them, they're gonna wake up, and then all their stuff is gonna proc. So it is a weaker debuff out of the control skills, but still, there is potential for her to be used. I just don't think she will be. The meta is so oversaturated with super degenerate units that a Tenebria is just not gonna cut it. They did increase her damage dealt, right? And then for her skill 3, the Nightmare, she will have a 100% chance now to defense break for 2 turns. Should have been like that forever, I'll be honest with you. And you have an 85% chance to put the opponents to sleep. Now, sleep is something that really doesn't come up too often in PvE. It's nice to... Sleep does decrease evasion, so it is useful in that regard in terms of PvP. Maybe in some instances of PvE, but in the end, I think she is still going to stay a PvE unit. This just makes her a bit better at her job, a bit more consistent at her job here. I'm not really sure if she's going to be used in PvP, but we could definitely try her out. I have her built. I just never really bring her into anything besides PvE content. But yeah, definitely consider subscribing to the channel if you want to see Tenebria maybe get used in Arena, maybe Guild Wars, maybe we could test her out there. And if she passes those tests, maybe we can go ahead and check her out in RTA. Now, speaking of units that are used in RTA, Fire Lidica getting another little buff here. Instead of decreasing buff durations by 1 turn with her skill 2, she will now dispel all buffs from the opponent. So this is huge because she used to kind of suck against units that have like 2-turn immunities and things, right? And so if you buff 2-turn immunity, she only decreases it by 1 turn. You can't inflict any debuffs at that point, and you're kind of screwed. So yeah, Lidica getting this is nice. My personal bias kicking in here again. I'm just asking, where's the Faithless Lidica buff, right? Small Gate, hello? Fire Lidica is legitimately just a better Faithless Lidica because she has better base speed, she has better skills, she has better everything. So yeah, rest in peace my Faithless Lidica. Hopefully, I believe, I'm still a believer, I still have faith that she'll get a balance adjustment one day. Her EE did get changed here though. The decreased buff durations by additional 1 turn is now going to be a decreased speed on the target for 2 turns when using Public Execution, which is her skill 3, which I think is fine. I don't really see this being used because you're already pushing the opponent back 100% combat readiness, so the decreased speed is not really useful. I mean, unless you're trying to like fully control a unit and lap them over and over and over again, but if you push them back and you defense broke them, they're probably gone anyway, right? So kind of a redundant little EE effect there in my opinion. Next up we have Iseria. So Iseria here is going to be kind of adding a bit more to her utility. So she'll now grant a greater attack buff for 2 turns when she resets the cooldown of somebody with her skill 2. And now she actually is going to have the skill be unaffected by cooldown increase and decrease effects, which is really nice, right? It is actually really nice so that she can't get reset and all that stuff. This might give her some potential again in PvP, but in general, probably still a PvE unit. There are PvE stages and stuff where, like the Dark Expedition, right, where the cannon keeps increasing your skill cooldowns. That can be really annoying. Light Iseria can be used for that now, I guess, but other than that, I don't really see this being significant. In Guild Wars, it can be, though. Iseria can be a really decent unit in Guild Wars for resetting the skills of some units, such as Hades, such as Dark Corvus, right? And then going to those kind of cheesy team comps there. Definitely can see her getting more utility and a bit more play, especially with the greater attack buff. Buffing for more damage is definitely going to be really, really nice. Okay, moving on, we have the last unit here, I believe, which is Cdom, an ML4. So she's now going to get an increased critical hit chance by 30% to her passive ability, right? Which is good. It makes it easier to build her here. Normally you would skill 3, and she gives everyone a critical hit chance buff, so everyone gets 50% crit rate. So this is kind of more balanced out where she just herself gets the 30%. You're never building units at 50% critical hit chance because in the instance where Cdom doesn't get her skill 3 off, if there's, you know, Celine or something on the other side in PvE, you're never going to get this to go. Now, Cdom in PvP, we did actually see her in the Epic 7 Masters. I think someone did draft her. They did end up losing, but I'm saying she does have some potential still in PvP. It's just that I just don't really see it as of right now. She's going to be more of a PvE unit for doing really good damage, right? Stacking up the damage here every time your allies crit. And she's actually going to be able to buff critical hit damage to all allies for 3 turns, which I think is a pretty good change. Increasing damage of all allies is better than just increasing their crit rate. Most of your DPS are going to be capped in crit rate anyway, so definitely a good change to see. But again, is it going to be meta changing? No. And overall, I think this entire balance update was meant to not be meta changing because of the Epic 7 World Championships that's right around the corner this summer, okay? Next up, though, we have Sword of Autumn Eclipse. So this is the Arunca artifact, and it used to just increase the attack of all allies by 5%. Now it's from 5 to 10%. This was honestly kind of a worthless change, and I really wish they gave it a better, I really, really wish they gave it a better effect, but this is just not it. yeah, I just don't see that being a thing. It's kind of like a Warhorn effect, but just worse, right? Because the support effect is just not there for the team, aside from the attack boost. Dark Bloodkeeper, this is Genoa's artifact, and honestly, I don't really like this change, I'll be very honest with you. I have Dark Bloodkeeper currently on Midnight Galililius, and I know I haven't used her in quite a while in RTA, but when she uses her skill 2, she grants a really chunky barrier because she gives herself an attack buff and she scales really well with attack. And the barrier was so good at keeping her alive, give her some solo potential as well. Now they're going to change it so you have a 50 to 100% chance to grant stealth for 2 turns. So now if you don't have this maxed out, then you don't even get the guarantee to get stealth. You get a chance to get stealth, and the stealth can only be granted once every 3 turns. I don't know how I feel about this. Wind Rider, which is already a very popular artifact on Gala, on Genoa, on these units, they already, you know, procced the stealth really often and hid your units, right? So I'm not really sure about this. I mean, I guess I can see it being okay on something like Genoa because you don't want to get hit, you want to stay alive longer. If they proc your passive, you go into stealth, maybe they don't have any single target attack damage dealers to hit you anymore. It could be okay. It definitely could be okay. I would say maybe this is something for like a Tori. I'm not sure. Tori is a thief. This is a thief artifact. So you can definitely see some potential open up with other units that might need survivability. Tori already has a built-in damage limit, but sometimes she does get focused down a little bit. We'll see though. The Dark Bloodkeeper, yeah. I personally don't really like it, but hey, if I can find a new unit to use it on, I'll be alright. I think it's okay. Here's the next one. I think this is one of the best ones that got buffed here. Double-Edged Decrescent. This is Ervelin's artifact. It increases evasion by 20%. If you use this on Arbiter Vildred, you'll have 90% evasion, right? And it says when successfully evading, you have a 25 to 50% chance to counterattack, up from 15 to 30% chance. Now, keep in mind, this doesn't stack with counter set. So if you have a max limit broken one and you have a 50% chance to counterattack when you evade, that's great, but keep in mind that it's 50% chance to counter after you pass the 90% check to dodge with Arbiter Vildred, right? And on top of that, with Arbiter Vildred, you have to keep in mind that if you're running a counter set, that's like a 30% chance there to counterattack. It's not going to combine. It's not going to make 80%, right? You have a 30% check and then a 50% check. 2 checks separately to see if you can counter. It's going to dramatically increase the odds of a counterattack, though, so it's really, really nice. And yeah, people just weren't playing it because this is an abysmal rate here. It's just worse than a counter set. This now is just better than a counter set. In fact, if you ran this with maybe a riposte set, riposte allows you to counterattack, 70% chance to counterattack when you dodge, right? So maybe that can be the new Arbiter Vildred play. Either counter set or riposte set, right? One of those 2 sets here could be decent, especially with Double-Edged Decrescent, which means this also opens up Double-Edged Decrescent to other units as well, such as Remnant Violets and stuff, right? Potentially bringing him back in as a unit that you can use in evasion-based teams, which are getting a bit more popular because, you know, Setsuka and all that stuff, right? Okay, anyway, moving on here, we have Manica of Control. This is Sez's artifact, but this is actually used quite a bit on top model Luluka. I don't have a top model Luluka, so I'm gonna leave this to you guys who do have, sorry, hang on, this is not top model Luluka, is it? Hit chance. No, this is not the top model Luluka one. Sorry, my bad. Manica of Control is not what I'm thinking of, which we'll talk about later. Manica of Control is about the hit chance, increasing hit chance on a single target attack. So I used this on Last Piece Corinne for a little bit, right? Because she does have the increased hit chance, and so if you put this on her, she gets an extra bit of hit chance. You can get like, I think it was 70% hit chance total with this, so you can hit like evasion units and stuff, which is kind of nice. But yeah, other than that, it's really not a huge change. It's just changing from a single target attack to AoE attacks. So now any thieves with AoE attacks can have 20% more hit chance, essentially sort of mostly nullifying Setsuka's passive. She gives everyone a 30% chance to evade. I don't know who's really going to be using this at all, but at least the versatility is now there. The option's there. Spatiotemporal Fan is Lua's artifact, and now this one here has a little buff to the turns. It just makes it a bit more accessible to some units who might have shorter turn rotations for cooldowns and things. It's fine, I guess. ML Politis sometimes uses this. That's like the only unit I can think of in the meta that is relevant that sometimes uses this artifact. But hey, maybe the door will open for other units to use it as well. Star of the Deep Sea. Now, Star of the Deep Sea here is also a bit interesting. This is the Summertime Iseria artifact, right? This is a limited artifact that Pirate Captain Flan and Summertime Iseria usually run, and they're getting rid of the fact that you normally have to make a non-critical hit in order to plant the bomb. Now you can just plant the bomb by hitting your opponent here, but it has to be with a basic skill. Now keep that in mind. This used to be only to, this it's still limited to single target attacks. They're just keeping the basic skill here. They're just removing the non-critical hit, and they're increasing the effectiveness by 15 to 30%. So they're putting the effectiveness that Pirate Captain Flan essentially lost in her passive into this artifact, which is alright. It does mean that when Pirate Captain Flan is sealed, for example, you don't lose that effectiveness buff, which is kind of nice. Summertime Iseria is obviously going to benefit from this as well. Essentially, besides that, it's not a huge deal. Only a couple units really ever use this artifact, but I think the change is alright. Not requiring the non-crit is more versatile, and maybe we'll see some more units be able to utilize it, right? Okay, next up is Twilight Calamity. So Twilight Calamity here is Ida's artifact, and Ida used to be a really good AoE cleave unit, right? So now she's gonna get increased effectiveness by 15 to 30%. She does have some debuffs in her kit, and you now have a 50 to 100% chance to grant increased attack to the cast for 2 turns after an ally uses a non-attack skill. Ida's passive was that if opponent uses if your ally uses a non-attack skill, you get to push up in combat readiness. So now you get the attack buff and the combat readiness gain. You have extra effectiveness, lowering the stats needed to allow her to apply debuffs effectively. So essentially give you more damage, more effectiveness for debuffs, and it synergizes really well with her kit overall. Is she going to be really relevant in the meta? I'm not certain. I mean, RGB units typically don't do as well as ML5s in terms of PvP. Right now, Commander Pavel's kind of running wild and amok and doing whatever he wants. Shepherd of the Dark Diane also kind of doing whatever she wants. But yeah, Ida can definitely be an option because she doesn't do defense penetration and all that, and she has pretty decent AoE damage, as well as some control too in her kit. Alright, moving on, we have Blackhand the Goddess. This is the one that I was talking about, top model Lidica's artifact that she uses. This is normally Fire Cowrick's artifact, right? But it used to grant you crit hit chance and crit hit damage by 12 to 24%. So you can run a top model Lidica with 76% crit rate, and you can just turn one, blast your opponent by one of their units. And this is significant because 24% crit rate is like 5 perfect crit rolls. And if you get like a mid crit roll, like let's say a 4% crit roll, right? It takes 6 of these, 6 crit rolls that you could have saved that can go into speed. So people build just a incredibly fast top model Lidicas now, and those top model Lidicas benefit from this artifact because it lowers the amount of gear that you need. You no longer have to get a bunch of crit rate. You can put that artifact on, and then you can just slam everything into speed and maybe a bit more attack or crit damage, right? So now what they're doing is they're actually lowering the overall crit chance you can get. It's only 15% now, but they are upping the crit damage that you're gonna get from this. So at the start of the battle, you do get this extra critical hit damage, and every time you make an attack, it goes down a little bit, down to 24%. So the minimum now is gonna be basically the new max, the old maximum. So it's not bad. You do lose a bit more crit chance, but this stays. This is a permanent 15% crit chance, right? Not gonna decrease every time you attack. So this is pretty decent. I'd say overall a pretty good change. If I get a top model Lidica anytime soon, I'm definitely slapping my Blackhand the Goddess onto her, and then we'll take her into RTA and give her a spin. So again, if you don't want to miss out on that, once I get the ML5 selector, we'll try to go ahead and grab her from that and see what we can do. Alright, next up we have Imprint Circuit balance adjustments. I don't know why it's called balance adjustments. They should just make a whole separate post about this, honestly. But the final speed increase is going to be removed, right? The increase by 3 is going to be decreased by 3, I guess you could say. It's going to be removed, and now it is, whenever you're attacking, if you're at an elemental advantage, increase damage dealt by 10%. Keep in mind that the Imprint Circuit is now exclusively for PvE content and not for PvP. So this is not a huge change, I'll be honest. It's like a very minimal change here. Very negligible, I'll be honest. The Iron Wall is actually going to get a buff, so instead of 5% damage reduction across the board, it's going to give you 15% damage reduction across the board, which is actually not bad. Again, this can help you clear out some sort of annoying endgame PvE content, make it a little bit easier, right? But the main thing I would say is this. The maximum applicable effectiveness chance cannot exceed 90% will now be 100%, meaning they just kind of sort of remove 15% from the game. This isn't even fully removing it, because keep in mind you can only put a certain number of units into the Imprint Circuit, 10 if you're at account rank, soul rank like 10 or something like that. You unlock another 5. So you can get 10 units. 10 units that can ignore effect res in PvE. Honestly, at this point they should just remove 15% in general, but hey, I guess it's a step in the right direction. I don't know what to say. So yeah, besides Arbiter Vildred and Double-Edged Decrescent, I am not particularly excited for too many of these things. I mean, it's kind of by design, it's intentional. But yeah, if you definitely want to see Arbiter Vildred in action, we're definitely going to revamp our DGen RB, guys. He is going to be sweet to use in RTA. So thank you so much for watching. I will catch you in the next one. Take care.